Today's talk is going to be about the Blessed Mother as an example of, the best example perhaps, of the contemplative path. Of course, we don't claim our Blessed Mother as only an example of this. Like a precious jewel, she shines from every side. Most of us have one or two talents that we shine at, but she shines in every way you look upon her. She's just delightful and so full of wisdom in her example, and so full of meaning in what she stands for as an archetype of some of the great spiritual principles of the Christian religion. But I'm going to talk to her about her in a kind of folksy way, if you don't mind, and show you how almost any situation that you might find yourself in, even a bad one, you can find her there ahead of you with lots of experience to share and the incredible compassion that goes with people who have passed to the next life successfully. So here is Mary minding her own business and getting ready for her life with Joseph, and when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this angel comes and says, hi, hail full of grace. That's quite a greeting. The Lord is with you. And she was troubled by this, we're told, and then the angel goes on to give her this grandiose idea of who she's going to bear. It's going to be the Messiah. It's going to be rule over the house of Jacob forever. This is a big shot she's going to have as a child, and you'd think she would be interested. Her response is anxiety or agitation, or she was upset. She didn't know what to do with this idea, and so she prudently says, how can this be, since I don't know man? Now, to grasp the full meaning of that question, let's look at what the consequences of saying yes would be. First of all, she would become what we know in our day as at the very least, an unwed mother to all appearances. We're talking now of how this situation looks to other people who don't know the mystery. First of all, it attacked 1, 2, 3, what we call the energy centers, or the instinctual needs for happiness that are important in childhood, but which she had never built into drives for happiness or substitutes for God, because from the moment of her consciousness, she experienced the divine union. It's the lack of that is the cause of all our troubles in growing up, and why we seek substitutes then other than God for the true happiness which is in God. God is the true security, the true freedom, the true and infinite love. So what that invitation proposed to her was that she give up all her security. As a Jewish woman, marriage was pretty important. It was the true security. She had that. With this pregnancy, it would be gone. She was going to have to face being known as an unwed mother or an adulterous woman, and in a small town with lots of relatives running in the house all the time, as this was the custom. Other people are going to know. And this shadow of this mysterious birth and its cause would follow her probably all her life. She would always be under a shadow. This is the classical procedure that God seems to have with people who are taking the spiritual journey seriously. And it's by means of these apparent impossible situations that bear no solution that one is pushed to a new level of consciousness in which one perceives the whole of reality from a new perspective, and the apparent opposites that are irreconcilable from the point of view of reason become resolved not rationally, but from a higher perspective that sees them as complementary and not in opposition. The double bind is when two opposing goods seem to be God's will for you or important for you, and you can't decide which to do. So you go through a period of intense confusion, of being like a ping pong ball going back and forth across the net. I advise you not to imitate Our Lady too closely. This is a dangerous woman, believe me, when you get down to the actual facts. Wonderful, but the more wonderful you are, the more searching the trials are going to be, because God seems to be relentless in trying to transform us more and more into the divine life, what He is, pure love. It meant that her understanding and her discernment process of what God willed in her life was completely thrown in the wastebasket by God. In other words, could she trust anymore her own discernment? Or would she consent and have no more control over her life because what she thought she should be doing, God didn't want her to do? Now these same dilemmas take place in our personal lives on the spiritual journey every now and then, through family problems, work problems, vocational problems. It's almost God's favorite pattern of developing your spiritual potentialities to their full. And no amount of rational conviction that sees into this marvelous plan of God from after the fact can hinder or mitigate the pain of being in the middle of it and having no idea what to do. St. Bernard has a marvelous sermon on this in which he says, all humanity, all the deceased, living and dead, are waiting on Mary's fiat. Will she say yes or will she say no? Her fiat, her self-surrender, is a letting go of her whole life with its expectations, her idea of happiness, even though it was untinged by the false values of the false self. Everything she had or was or could do is poured into that one word, the symbol of every fiber of her being and all her faculties, surrendering to the ultimate mystery, God as mystery. And it's that acceptance of the unknown future that many of us have to accept. I think everybody has to accept at points. You've got to trust this God who doesn't tell you in advance what the future is going to be. He doesn't tell you. And that's the contract. Once you say yes, then you begin to find out. It begins to make sense. He begins to reassure you and so on. But here is where Mary stands out magnificently for all of us. And that's what we mean by saying imitate Mary's fiat, which means a lot more than okay. I'll put up with it. It means, here I am. Do with me anything that you want. I'm ready to go anywhere or nowhere, to be something or to be nothing. So he sees the paradigm of saying yes to God in the double bind, which you certainly will experience perhaps many times over, and perhaps in classical dramatic fashion if you're on the spiritual journey. And if you are, and the spiritual journey, its heart is contemplative prayer, the inner transformation of our faculties into God's way of doing things.